Well. This video is probably the most important video you're ever gonna watch. If you're a Bitcoiner, you need to watch this. Absolutely, because the Coldcard incident is not the end of the situation. Also, there's something crazy is happening with the Coldcard situation, and no one's talking about it, and I don't know why. Okay, so let me do a quick summary of the Coldcard situation. And I'm going to give why you're at risk. And I have apps and websites and stuff that I'm going to be showing y'all data and statistics on why you are completely screwed. So, for those of you who do not know, Coldcard created a hardware wallet. Long story short, a lot of users generated their seed phrase with a Coldcard, and it was not random enough. And someone was able to figure out how the seed phrases were generated, and they have been draining tons of Bitcoin from people's Coldcards. Me personally, I've actually used a Coldcard. I have 2 of them. I'm actually not affected because I actually no longer use Bitcoin for all of these reasons above I'm about to mention. I've completely migrated to Caspa, so I'm exempt from really any of the problems that go on with Bitcoin. So that's kind of nice. But for those people who are still on the Bitcoin network and have all these trust assumptions, this is kind of how people will be affected. So it's only going to get worse from here. So this is just a warning. So let me explain what's happening right now. Right now there is, let me go on X, and you can see there's a bunch of, I bookmarked some stuff. But yeah, everyone's Coldcards is basically cooked. People are losing their life savings over like here we go. This is like how much Bitcoin's been drained. 1,000 Bitcoin. You can pause the video real quick. There might be a conspiracy theory behind this, who knows. But the idea is people are losing their cold storage Bitcoin. But that's not the issue here. This actually is neck and neck with Bitcoin and Caspa. This is a Caspa-related event. This Coldcard situation is a Caspa-related event. I know that sounds strange, but it is 100% correlated, and let me explain. Right now, if you, let me go to this. Let me go to this. This is the danger of what's happening right now. No one is talking about this. So, Bitcoin transactions per day. This is how many transactions there are on Bitcoin per day. You can see Bitcoin transactions per day. Why does this matter? Well, recently transactions have been spiking like crazy. Bitcoin is only capable of doing roughly 800,000 regular transactions a day. And we are almost at that limit. So if you hold Bitcoin, the network is like 90% congested right now. I don't know if you know what that means, but if you look prior to this Coldcard event, the numbers for Bitcoin transactions are a lot lower, with some exceptions. But the network is roughly at like half usage. There are some days where it's actually almost at max usage. But here's what I want to point out. The network bounces around from 500,000 transactions a day to 800,000 transactions a day. And these are just base, regular transactions back and forth, everyday folk using Bitcoin, sending it to cold storage, opening Lightning channels. Some days there's only 500K people. Some days there's 800K people. But you can directly see as soon the date of the Coldcard event, it was one of these days. The date of the Coldcard event where a hardware wallet was exposed and everyone's keys was at risk, the attacker started taking all the money. But what that means is if you own a Coldcard, you're now crapping your pants. You're now like, holy shit, I'm going to poop my pants. I need to take my money from a Coldcard and move it to another wallet. So you have to take your seed phrase and change it and move your at-risk Bitcoin. So you know what happens is Bitcoin's traffic goes from 500,000 transactions a day that are normal to an extra 400,000, 200,000 extra panicking transactions. There's people with multiple addresses that, holy crap, I need to move my Bitcoin because I'm panicking. These transactions lower here are just regular dum-de-dum-de-dum, just sending my Bitcoin. But on these dates above, these are panic transactions, right? But what's the problem here is that just a few 100,000 more transactions and the Bitcoin network is at its limit. At its limit. Meaning if we had a day like this and the Coldcard event happened, fees would be spiking instantly from 10 cents to 50 cents and exponentially overnight can become $1, $5, $10. And that panic, this is a time sensitive event. Very quickly, anything above 850-ish thousand transactions becomes PVP in the fee market and exponential because you're paying to jump in front of the next person. And so if you have $1 million on a Coldcard and there's this hack going around and every second, every hour, there's wallets being drained and you need to de-risk yourself immediately, you're going to pay big money to get the hell to a new wallet. It's like Black Friday sales event, except it's panic. Instead of everyone going in the store, everyone's trying to go out of the store. You don't want to get stuck in that. And so that's actually what we're seeing. But fortunately, it did not hit 850-ish thousand. So the fee market never really kicked in. Fee market was still relatively low because people got lucky. That's the only luck that occurred recently, is that it didn't happen on a day like this. If this Coldcard event happened a week prior, there would be 2 news articles. Right now, there's only 1 news article. Coldcard wallets hacked, right? If this happened a week prior, there'd be 2 news articles. The second news article would be Coldcard wallets hacked and Bitcoin network congested and people cannot move their funds. Bank run. This is called a bank run. A bank run is when you can't access your money when and where you want to, and the network essentially congests. We've seen this with fiat, and we flew so close to the sun with Bitcoin this week. This week, we flew close to the sun. There was an emergency event that happened. People's life savings were at risk of being drained, and the network hit almost max usage. But because fees were, people don't understand this. Anything under $800,000, anything under 800,000 transactions, it's always going to be pennies. Anything above that instantly becomes exponential and dangerous and very quickly can enter the hundreds of dollars, $200 per UTXO. Pretty much most people that are using a Coldcard are probably, the people are affected, they probably have multiple UTXOs. So if they have, 50 grand in a Coldcard and they have, 10 UTXOs comprised of that and fees get to $200, which has happened before, if they have 10 UTXOs at $200, that's $2,000 to move 50 grand. So anyways, why does this matter? Because this is what you just witnessed was, holy crap, people got lucky. Coldcard, how is it that a garbage hardware wallet, and I say garbage because I've owned a Coldcard before. I owned 2 of them. The USB port stopped working, the buttons are trash, and the SD card slot is janky. I had to hold the spring click feature when you inject the SD card stopped working. And not only that, but it barely can read an SD card. So yeah, I've tried to use a Coldcard for 3 to 4 years straight, and that's actually one of the reasons I found Caspa, is because I realized this is just retarded. It takes an hour to use a Coldcard, and then it takes an hour for your Bitcoin to send. Plus, there's bank run risk. Are you kidding me? So Bitcoin flew this close to the sun, and no one's talking about it. So I just want to mention that here's what went wrong. Well, anyway, that's actually for another video. But what I want to point out here is that if this had happened on another day, we would have seen a total collapse. And can you imagine the headline? Imagine you're someone with a Coldcard. There's people next to you who have a Coldcard who are losing all of their money. You need to switch to a different seed phrase and possibly a different wallet. You need to move your Bitcoin, but the network's also congested because there's a bunch of people doing the exact same thing as you. Everyone's trying to leave. Only 800,000 people can leave at the same time. And so if normal network traffic is 500,000 people, what happens when more than the difference of 800,000, if normal's 500,000, the total's 800,000, what's the difference, right? What happens when the difference is more than the network capacity? You're screwed in a time of panic. All of these Bitcoin experts are telling you, move your Bitcoin ASAP. You're at risk. Move your Bitcoin ASAP. There are wallets that took a day to respond, and the ones who took longer than a day lost their money, because right now it's what's happening is people are using AI to figure out the randomly generated seed phrases, and they're brute forcing in a they have a very narrow, less randomized set of parameters that they can figure out and guess the seed phrases, right? And basically they're able to brute force seed phrases, and it doesn't take a while. And so every hour, boom, they find another wallet. They find another wallet. So you could literally be 6 hours away from your wallet getting drained. And these hackers started moving on to passphrases. So if you have a Coldcard generated seed phrase, you might have a custom passphrase that only has 32 units of entropy. That's the amount of randomness. There are people who have passphrases that are getting drained. So time is of the essence. And so I just want to point out that if you're someone who had a Coldcard, you literally dodged a bullet, but not only that, you got so lucky that the Bitcoin network did not congest, because you were 100,000 transactions away from it becoming PvP. PvP against everyone bidding against each other to move their funds to something safer. Imagine you couldn't cough up the $1,000 fee, or you were still trying to decide, like, oh crap. And by that time, boom, your funds are drained. And this is the issue with throughput. This is literally Bitcoin's issue, is it has no throughput. It doesn't matter. Lightning won't save you here. This is not a debate about Bitcoin versus Lightning. Bitcoin has no throughput. The base layer has no throughput. Anyone with cold storage is cooked. This is why Caspa is different. Caspa is a stricter, more hardened money than Bitcoin, and it would be capable to have up to 200 million transactions, more than that. 200 million transactions in a day, whereas Bitcoin only can barely do 800,000. And also on top of that, Bitcoin has 200 million cold wallets. What we saw the past couple days, the level of panic, the Bitcoin network is at like 90% usage right now. There's 200 million existing cold wallets. Imagine if any of them are scared. There's probably people with ledgers that are like, you know what? I'm just going to move my Bitcoin in case. You know what? I'm going to run it on my own node instead, on a Linux machine. What I'm trying to suggest here is that something external outside of Bitcoin caused a jump scare and panic for valid reason, and now it's causing a lot of activity on the network. And this was a very small event. A very small wallet manufacturer made one screw up, and the whole network is at 90% usage. Not a lot of cold cards are affected. I think less than 500 or maybe 1,000 cold cards, I believe, are affected. That's not a big number. So how is it that 1,000 cold cards are affected, yet the Bitcoin network jumps to 90% usage? It's because of panic. If you see 1,000 people losing all their money, 100,000 people might look at that and say, well, we got to act now. That could be me. So even though, I hope I'm making some sense, right? Anyways, that's why the throughput is so important, because in a time of crisis, you do not want to be stuck in traffic. This is what could have happened on Bitcoin. This is a time of crisis. This is a time to protect yourself and move yourself to a safe situation. And it almost had a traffic jam as well. That's what's going on with Bitcoin, and no one's talking about that part. So this is what Caspa solves. Caspa is a version of Bitcoin that is a hardened sound money that you won't have a traffic jam when there is a catastrophic event inside or externally, like a stupid hardware wallet. Anyways, I could make a whole other video about hardware wallets and why that's a whole thing, but this video is strictly about comparing the networks under a load of stress from an external event. So I am exempt from all this Coldcard garbage because I use Caspa. So my network's literally not even under attack that I use. But also, my seed phrase is not generated from a computer, so I'm not at risk there. And then, yeah. Anyways, my brain is fried. Thanks for watching. There's so many reasons to own Caspa. Peace.